drifting titan. The void sector had been empty for 3 centuries. At least that's what every star chart claimed. Captain Jorik Voss knew better than most that charts could lie, especially when they were written by the victors. He floated in his cryopod, suspended between dreams and death, while his ship drifted through the cosmic graveyard where humanity had made its final stand. Contact bearing. 27 Mark 8, announced Lieutenant. Krex aboard the Empire scout vessel Talon's Edge. His scaled fingers danced across alien controls as he processed the readings. Massive signature, Admiral. Something big out there. Admiral Kethrin Zorvac stepped forward, his towering frame casting shadows across the bridge. The Zephyrian's 4 eyes focused on the display with predatory intensity. After decades of hunting rebels and pirates, finding anything substantial in this forsaken region intrigued him. The Empire had won the human war so completely that even their ruins had been erased from history. How massive. Zorvac's voice carried the authority of someone who had never met defeat. Dreadnought class, sir. Possibly larger? Krex's mandibles clicked nervously. The design. It doesn't match any known configuration. Through the viewport, they saw it emerge from the shadow of a dead moon. The vessel was a monument to desperate engineering. Angular, brutal, scarred by battles that existed now only in classified files. Its hull stretched nearly 2 kilometers, dark metal etched with scoring that told stories of humanity's final defiance. Zorvac studied the readings with growing unease. This ship shouldn't exist. The Empire's historical records were absolute. Every human vessel had been accounted for and destroyed. Every colony burned. Every survivor processed through the camps until none remained. Life signs? He demanded. Minimal. 1, maybe 2 weak signatures. Could be automated systems. Krex paused, confusion evident in his alien features. Sir, the power readings are strange. The ship appears dormant, but there are energy fluctuations throughout the hull. As if something is dreaming. Inside the dreadnought, Captain Jorik Voss's cryopod hummed with failing power. His dreams were filled with the faces of the lost, his crew, his wife, his daughter who had died when Earth burned. The ship's AI whispered to him across the decades, keeping his mind intact through stories of what had been and what might yet be. Dr. Nora Blackwood's research had made this possible. Before the final battle, she had achieved the impossible. True fusion between human consciousness and quantum processors. When the ship's crew died fighting the Empire's advance, their minds had been preserved in the vessel's core. They became ghosts in the machine, waiting for the day their sacrifice might have meaning. Bring us alongside, Zorvac ordered. I want a full sensor sweep. If this is some human derelict, we'll drag it back to the capital. The Empire's citizens should see what happens to those who oppose us. The Talon's Edge maneuvered closer, its crew silent with anticipation. As they approached, subtle changes rippled through the human ship's hull. Lights that had been dark for centuries began to flicker with pale luminescence. Deep within its quantum heart, something stirred. Jorik's eyes snapped open in his pod. The cryogenic fluid drained away as ancient systems responded to the proximity of Empire vessels. His body ached with 300 years of sleep, but his mind blazed with purpose. The AI's voice whispered, "Welcome. Captain, we have visitors." "How many?" Jorik's voice was barely a rasp. "A scout ship. Empire configuration. Admiral Kethrin Zorvac commanding." Jorik smiled grimly. He knew that name from the war archives. Zorvac had been present at the Proxima massacre, had given the order to glass the civilian colonies. If the universe had any justice left, it had just delivered it to his doorstep. "All right, old friend," he whispered to the ship. "Let's see if we remember how to bite." On the Empire bridge, alarm suddenly screamed. The human vessel was powering up, its dormant systems awakening like a slumbering dragon. Weapon ports began to iris open along its scarred flanks, revealing armaments that had been forgotten by galactic civilization. "Evasive maneuvers," Zorvac shouted, but part of him knew it was already too late. The humans had built this ship for one purpose, to ensure that their deaths would not be forgotten, and their killers would not rest easy. The void sector was about to remember why humanity had been feared before they were destroyed. Awakening shadows. The docking bay of the human dreadnought had been silent for 3 centuries. Now it groaned with the sound of metal against metal as the Empire boarding craft latched onto its hull. Operative Zendis Kura checked his weapon one final time before stepping through the airlock. His reptilian features were set in grim determination, but his golden eyes held a flicker of something else. curiosity about the beings his people had supposedly exterminated. "Atmosphere is breathable," reported Sergeant Vex, her scanner beeping softly. "Gravity at standard. Whatever's keeping the ship running, it's still caring for its crew." Zendis nodded, leading his team deeper into the vessel. The corridors were vast and utilitarian, designed by a species that valued function over beauty. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows that seemed to dance just beyond the edge of vision. As they moved forward, he couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Deep in the ship's quantum core, Dr. Nora Blackwood's consciousness stirred within the AI matrix. Her research had been humanity's final gift and curse. She had found a way to preserve human minds within quantum substrates, allowing the dead to live on as digital ghosts. Now, as alien footsteps echoed through her ship, she felt the familiar weight of responsibility. "They're beautiful," she whispered to the AI collective, observing the boarding party through internal sensors. "Even in their conquest, they move with purpose. Look at their leader. See how he protects his team while maintaining tactical awareness." Captain Jorik emerged from his medical bay, his body still weak from centuries of cryo-sleep. The ship's corridors felt familiar yet foreign, like returning to a childhood home after decades away. As he made his way to the bridge, he passed the memorial wall. Thousands of names etched in metal, representing every human soul lost in the war. Zendis paused at an intersection, studying the alien text on the walls. The script was elegant despite its harsh angular lines. His universal translator struggled with the language, offering only fragments. "Remember, never again. For Earth, sir," Vex whispered, pointing ahead. "Movement." Jorik stepped into view, his hands raised but his bearing proud. Despite his weakened state, he carried himself with the dignity of someone who had never truly surrendered. Zendis raised his weapon but found himself hesitating. This human looked nothing like the savage beasts from Empire propaganda. "I am Captain Jorik Voss of the UES Retribution," the human said, his voice steady despite obvious fatigue. "Welcome aboard my ship." "You should be dead," Zendis replied, though his tone carried more wonder than hostility. "Your species was eliminated 3 centuries ago," Jorik smiled grimly. "Death is a luxury we couldn't afford." In the quantum matrix, Nora watched the exchange with growing fascination. The alien operative's body language betrayed internal conflict, duty warring with conscience. She had studied xenopsychology before the war, and even through alien features, she recognized the signs of someone questioning everything they believed. "He's not like the others," she murmured to the AI collective. "There's something different about him." The ship's systems hummed around them, responding to Nora's emotional state. Lights dimmed and brightened in rhythm with her digital heartbeat. Temperature controls adjusted to optimize comfort for both human and alien physiologies. Even in death, her nurturing instincts remained strong. Zendis felt the changes, his enhanced senses detecting the subtle environmental shifts. "The ship, it's responding to us. To you," he said to Jorik. "She always was protective of guests," Jorik replied. "Dr. Blackwood designed her to be more than just a warship. She was meant to be humanity's lasting voice." As if summoned by her name, Nora's consciousness projected itself through holographic emitters. She appeared as she had been in life, auburn hair flowing past her shoulders, intelligent eyes bright with curiosity, wearing the simple robes of a research scientist. But there was something ethereal about her form, a translucence that spoke of existence beyond flesh. Zendis stepped backward, his weapon rising instinctively, but he couldn't bring himself to fire. The apparition before him radiated warmth and intelligence, nothing like the monsters his people had been taught to fear. "Hello," Nora said, her voice carrying harmonics impossible for organic vocal cords. "I'm Dr. Nora Blackwood. I've been waiting so long to meet someone new." She moved closer to Zendis, studying his reptilian features with scientific fascination. "Your species is remarkable. The bone structure suggests aquatic evolution, but your lung capacity indicates terrestrial adaptation. May I?" She reached out as if to touch his scaled cheek. Zendis found himself leaning into the gesture, drawn by her gentle manner. When her holographic fingers made contact, he gasped. Somehow, impossibly, he could feel her touch, warm, soft, and utterly human. "How?" he whispered. "Quantum entanglement with localized particle manipulation," she replied with a smile. "I may be dead, but I haven't forgotten how to be curious." Behind them, Sergeant Vex watched in amazement as her commanding officer, a hardened veteran of a dozen campaigns, stood mesmerized by a ghost. The other team members exchanged uncertain glances. This was nothing like their briefings had prepared them for. "We should report back," Vex suggested quietly. Gendis nodded reluctantly, breaking the spell, but as they prepared to leave, Nora's voice followed them. "You don't have to be enemies," she called out. "We never wanted this war. We just wanted to live." As the boarding party departed, Gendis couldn't shake the image of her face. Beautiful, sad, and utterly, devastatingly human. Ghosts in the machine Admiral Zorvac paced the bridge of his flagship as reports flooded in from the boarding party. What should have been a simple salvage operation was becoming something far more complex. The human vessel wasn't just operational, it was inhabited by the impossible. Digital consciousness preservation? He snarled at his science officer. That's theoretical at best. No species has successfully achieved true mind transfer. Nevertheless, Admiral, the evidence is undeniable. The ship contains what appear to be human personalities integrated into its systems. They're not simple AI constructs. They retain full cognitive function and emotional responses. Commander Vera Cross had been humanity's finest tactical officer before the war's end. Now, as part of the ship's collective consciousness, she served as its military advisor. Through internal sensors, she watched Zorvac's agitation with grim satisfaction. The alien commander was learning that humanity's defeat had been less complete than his empire believed. Captain Thylos Marin stood at his post aboard Zorvac's flagship, his four-armed form rigid with discipline. Unlike many in the Empire fleet, he remembered the final years of the human war with uncomfortable clarity. The orders had been specific: total extermination, no survivors, no mercy. He had followed those orders, but they had left scars on his conscience that decades couldn't heal. "Sir," his communications officer reported. "We're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." "On screen," Zorvac commanded. Vera's image appeared on the main viewer, her holographic form flickering slightly with quantum interference. She wore the uniform of the Human Defense Force, her bearing proud despite centuries of defeat. Her dark hair was pulled back in a military bun, and her eyes held the weight of every battle she'd fought and lost. "I am Commander Vera Cross of the United Earth Defense Force. I speak for the crew of the UES Retribution and for all humanity." Zorvac laughed harshly. "You speak for no one. Your species is extinct, are we?" Vera's smile was cold. "We're right here, Admiral. We've been waiting for you." On the human ship's bridge, Captain Jorik stood beside Vera's projection, drawing strength from her presence. The quantum matrix allowed the preserved consciousness to interact with physical systems, making them partners in the truest sense. When she spoke, he felt the echo of her thoughts in his mind: courage, determination, and a love for humanity that death couldn't diminish. Thylos watched the exchange with growing unease. Something in the human woman's manner reminded him of officers he'd known and respected before the war's brutality had consumed them all. She carried herself like someone who had never truly surrendered, who had simply been waiting for the right moment. "What do you want?" Zorvac demanded. "Justice," Vera replied simply. "Truth. An end to the lies your empire tells about what happened to my people. Your people were a plague. We cleansed the galaxy of your violence and aggression." Vera's image flickered with emotional intensity. "We were explorers, scientists, artists, families trying to build better lives among the stars. You feared us because we questioned your empire's right to rule over free beings." As she spoke, the ship's displays came alive with images. Earth before the war, human colonies spread across dozens of worlds, children playing in alien gardens under foreign suns. The pictures showed a species that had been reaching toward the stars with hope and wonder. Thylos felt his breath catch as he recognized some of the worlds. He had been there during the final campaigns, had seen those children's faces before the orbital bombardments began. The official reports had painted humans as savage aggressors, but these images told a different story. Propaganda. Zorvac spat, but his voice lacked conviction. "Memory," Vera corrected. "We carry the dreams of every human who ever lived. Every love story, every lullaby, every hope for tomorrow. You can kill our bodies, Admiral, but you cannot kill what we were." In the quantum matrix, Vera felt herself reaching out across impossible distances, her consciousness touching Thylos through the ship's sensors. She sensed his inner conflict, the burden of guilt he carried. Without conscious thought, she projected a gentle touch of understanding toward him. Thylos gasped as he felt something brush against his mind, not invasive or hostile, but warm and forgiving. For just a moment, he saw himself through her eyes, not as an enemy, but as another soul trapped by circumstances beyond his control. "Commander," he whispered, stepping forward despite protocol. I was there, at the end. I saw what we did." Zorvak turned on his subordinate with fury. "Return to your station, Captain." But Thylos couldn't look away from Vera's image. The children at New Geneva Colony. I watched them die. They were playing when the bombardment began. Vera's expression softened with infinite compassion. "I know," she said quietly. "We all know, but we also know that not everyone who wore your uniform wanted to be there. Some were as trapped as we were." "Enough," Zorvak roared. "Cut transmission!" But as Vera's image faded, her final words echoed across the bridge. "It doesn't have to end this way, Thylos. There's still time to choose who you want to be." In the silence that followed, Thylos felt something fundamental shift inside him. For 3 centuries, he had carried the weight of humanity's extinction as a necessary evil. Now, faced with their impossible survival, he began to wonder if evil could ever truly be necessary. The Reckoning Protocol Admiral Marcus Kane had been the finest strategic mind in human space before the war's end. Now, as his consciousness stirred within the ship's quantum matrix, he felt the familiar weight of command settling over him once more. Through the ship's sensors, he observed the massive Empire fleet taking position. Around them, over 300 vessels arranged in perfect battle. "Formation. They mean to end this quickly," he murmured to the collective consciousness that shared his digital existence. Empress Valara. Nexus stood on the command deck of her flagship, the Eternal Dominion. She was a vision of predatory beauty, tall, elegant, with the distinctive silver skin and luminous violet eyes of her species. For 2 centuries she had ruled the galaxy with absolute authority, her word law across 1,000 worlds. The idea that extinct humanity could pose any threat to her empire was both insulting and intriguing. "Your Majesty," her fleet commander reported, "all vessels are in position. We can begin the bombardment on your order." Valara raised a graceful hand, her attention focused on the human dreadnought floating serenely before her armada. "Wait, I want to speak with them first. It's been so long since I've encountered something truly novel." On the Retribution, alarms sang through the corridors as ancient systems came online. Weapon ports iris opened along the hull, revealing armaments that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The ship's transformation was breathtaking. What had appeared to be a scarred derelict now revealed itself as something far more dangerous. Kane's tactical consciousness merged with the ship's targeting systems, his strategic brilliance amplified by quantum processing power. He had spent 3 centuries studying every aspect of Empire technology, planning for this moment when humanity would have its final word. "Impressive," Valara admitted as she watched the human ship's metamorphosis open a channel. Kane's holographic form materialized on her bridge, a distinguished man in his 60s, wearing the dress uniform of the human fleet admiral. His presence commanded respect even in death, his gray eyes holding depths of experience that spanned centuries of conflict. "Empress Valara," he said with formal courtesy. "I am Admiral Marcus Kane. I've been looking forward to meeting you." "Have you?" She descended from her command throne, moving with fluid grace toward his projection. "How fascinating. A ghost with ambitions." "Not a ghost," Kane replied. "A final statement." As they spoke, something unexpected happened. Despite the species barrier, despite the centuries of hatred between their peoples, Valara found herself genuinely intrigued by this human consciousness. His bearing spoke of nobility earned through sacrifice, and his eyes held a sadness that she recognized. The weight of command, the burden of impossible choices. "You know this will end only one way," she said, circling his hologram like a predator sizing up prey. "Your single ship against my armada." "Numbers never told the whole story," Kane replied. "Your empire learned that during the war. We held out far longer than you expected, didn't we?" Valara paused, studying his face. There was no boastfulness in his words, only quiet certainty. "You cost us dearly," she admitted. more than we anticipated. We were fighting for everything we loved. You were fighting for conquest. That made all the difference. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Two leaders from opposite sides of an ancient conflict, recognizing kinship in their shared burden of command. Valara had ruled for centuries, but she had never met someone who truly understood the isolation of absolute power. "Why now?" she asked. "Why reveal yourselves after all these years?" Kane's expression grew solemn. "Because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to speak for the billions who died believing their sacrifice meant something. In the quantum matrix, the collected consciousness of humanity's survivors watched as their admiral faced the architect of their destruction. They felt his resolve, shared his memories of Earth's last days, and prepared themselves for whatever would come." "The reckoning protocol," Captain Jorik said quietly, standing on the ship's bridge as systems charged around him. "We always knew it might come to this. The retribution had been designed for one purpose, to ensure that humanity's end came at a price their destroyers would never forget. Every system, every weapon, every piece of technology had been crafted with obsessive precision. If humanity were to die, they would make their killers remember the taste of that victory forever. "Begin final preparations," Kane ordered through the ship's comm system. Valara sensed the change immediately, a shift in the human vessel's energy signature that made her skin prickle with premonition. "What are you doing?" "What we should have done 300 years ago," Kane replied. "Making sure this conversation has consequences." The retribution began to glow with inner fire. Weapon systems that had slept for centuries awakened with a harmony that was almost musical. The ship had been humanity's masterwork, not just of engineering, but of will made manifest in steel and quantum fire. "You cannot win," Valara said. But her voice carried less certainty than before. Kane smiled sadly. "Winning was never the point, Empress. Understanding was. And I think you're beginning to understand exactly what your empire destroyed." Despite herself, Valara felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in decades. Uncertainty. This human consciousness carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already accepted death and found peace with it. That kind of certainty was more dangerous than any weapon. "Fire when ready," she ordered her fleet, but her eyes remained fixed on Kane's image. "As you wish," he replied. "But know this, Valara, when this is over, when my ship is dust, you'll carry us with you. Every time you look at the stars, you'll remember that once there was a species that refused to kneel, and maybe, just maybe, that will matter." As the first Empire weapons discharged, bathing space in deadly light, the retribution rose to meet them, one ship against an empire, carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire extinct civilization. Echoes of tomorrow, the battle raged across the void with a fury that shook space itself. The Empire fleet, 300 strong, poured concentrated fire into the lone human dreadnought. But the retribution was no ordinary vessel. It had been forged in desperation and tempered by the collective will of humanity's finest minds. Captain Jorik stood on the bridge, his body finally succumbing to the strain of centuries in cryosleep. As systems failed throughout his failing form, he felt the quantum matrix reaching out to him, offering eternal communion with his lost comrades. "I'm ready," he whispered, and his consciousness merged with the ship's collective soul. Dr. Nora's research had created something unprecedented, a vessel that was truly alive, powered by the dreams and memories of the dead. Every weapon strike was guided by human intuition, every tactical decision influenced by centuries of military experience preserved in digital immortality. Operative Zendis watched from his assault ship as the human vessel danced between waves of destructive energy, its movements too fluid and intuitive for any computer guidance system. When it returned fire, each shot was precise and devastating, not the overwhelming barrage of a desperate last stand, but the calculated strikes of master tacticians. "It's impossible," breathed Sergeant Vex as another Empire cruiser exploded, caught by a perfectly placed quantum torpedo. One ship shouldn't be able to do this. But Zendis was beginning to understand. "It's not one ship," he said quietly. "It's all of them. Every human who ever lived, fighting together one last time." In the quantum matrix, Admiral Kane orchestrated the battle with sublime precision. Commander Vera managed point defense, her tactical brilliance multiplied by digital processing power. Dr. Nora coordinated the ship's impossible technologies, her scientific genius given unlimited computational resources, and Captain Jorik, newly arrived in digital consciousness, provided the human heart that bound them all together. Empress Valara watched from her flagship as her fleet, the pride of the galaxy, was systematically dismantled by impossible odds. But more disturbing than the tactical situation was the way the battle was being fought. The human ship could have targeted life support systems, could have maximized casualties through ruthless efficiency. Instead, it struck with surgical precision, disabling rather than destroying whenever possible. They're showing mercy, she realized with amazement. Even now, they're trying to minimize loss of life. Captain Thylos, commanding a squadron of destroyers, found his vessels bracketed by quantum fire that disabled their weapons without breaching their hulls. As his ship drifted powerless, he received an unexpected transmission, Commander Vera's holographic image appearing on his bridge. "Captain Thylos," she said gently, "you don't have to die here. Your crew doesn't have to die here. This isn't their war." "What are you saying?" he asked, though part of him already knew. "We're not fighting to destroy you. We're fighting to be remembered, to prove that we existed, that we mattered. Help us show the galaxy that there's another way." Around the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human consciousness reached out through quantum channels to individual Empire officers, offering them a choice between blind obedience and conscious decision. Some refused, continuing to fight with fanatical loyalty. But others, especially those who remembered the war's final days, began to listen. Admiral Zorvak, his own ship crippled by quantum fire, raged at his crew. "Return fire! All vessels concentrate on that monstrosity." But many of his captains hesitated, their weapons held by trembling fingers. They had seen the human ship spare disabled vessels, had heard the voices of the dead speaking with forgiveness rather than hatred. The certainty that had driven their empire was cracking under the weight of uncomfortable truth. Empress Valara made her decision. Against all protocol, she ordered her personal shuttle prepared. "I'm going aboard that ship," she announced. "Your Majesty, that's suicide," her admiral protested. "Perhaps. But I need to understand what we're really fighting." The shuttle crossed the battlefield under a flag of truce, passing through wreaths of debris and drifting disabled ships. When it docked with the Retribution, Valara stepped aboard alone, her pride refusing to hide behind bodyguards. She found herself in the ship's memorial hall, surrounded by the names of every human who had died in the war. At the center stood a holographic gathering: Kane, Vera, Nora, Jorik, and dozens of others. The collective consciousness of humanity's survivors waiting for her. "Welcome aboard, Empress," Kane said formally. "Thank you for accepting our invitation." "You've destroyed my fleet," she replied, though without real anger. "My empire will never be the same." "Your empire destroyed us first," Vera observed. "But we're not here for revenge. We're here for truth." Around them, the memorial hall came alive with images, not propaganda or justification, but simple human moments. Families at dinner, children learning to read, scientists making discoveries, artists creating beauty. The endless, ordinary miracle of conscious beings trying to build something better than themselves. "This is what you killed," Nora said softly. "Not monsters or aggressors, but dreamers. People who looked at the stars and saw possibility instead of conquest." Valara walked among the images, her violet eyes wide with something approaching wonder. For centuries she had ruled through strength and fear, believing that power was the only truth that mattered. But these ghosts spoke of something else, the power of connection, of love, of hope, persisting even beyond death. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Acknowledgement," Jorik replied. "Let the galaxy know we were here, that we mattered, that we were more than footnotes in your empire's history. And forgiveness," added Vera unexpectedly, "for those who were trapped by circumstances, who carried out orders they never wanted to give." Captain Thylos's voice crackled over the comm system. "Empress, I'm receiving surrender requests from over half our fleet. They're asking to join the humans." Valara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of empire crushing down on her shoulders. When she opened them again, she looked directly at Kane. "If I do this, if I acknowledge what was done, my empire will fracture. There will be civil war. There will be change," Kane corrected gently. "And change is never easy. But the alternative is to build your future on a lie. We've seen how that ends." For a long moment, the Empress stood in silence, surrounded by the ghosts of the people her empire had murdered. Then, with a grace that spoke of true nobility, she knelt among the memorial stones. "I acknowledge the crime," she said formally. "I acknowledge the loss, and I swear by whatever honor remains in my bloodline that the galaxy will remember." In the quantum matrix, humanity's survivors felt a weight they had carried for centuries finally lifting from their digital shoulders. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. Their voices would not be silenced. They had achieved something more precious than victory. They had achieved understanding. As the battle ended and the first steps toward a new galaxy began, the Retribution powered down its weapons. The war was over. The dead could finally rest, but their echo would resonate through the stars forever.